welcome to my inaugural podcast called Defeating the Darkness. Crime stories, true crime stories with downtown Heather Brown. And today with me is my all-time favorite friend. Sorry for all the rest of my friends. You're my favorite too. But I have with us today one of my dearest friends, Robin Sachs, who is not just my friend. She is a badass lawyer who does everything you could ever imagine under the sun. And I thought, what better way to start my podcast than with my friend who was with me when this whole adventure started back in, when was it?
1994.
In the 1900s.
Back pre-cell phone. Where we actually had to write notes to each other in class.
Yes, I remember that. I think I was one of the very few people that actually had a computer.
You were fancy.
I was super fancy. So we went to law school together at Pepperdine Law School in Malibu and got a wonderful education.
Are they sponsoring this or something?
No.
You don't need to say that.
Oh, I'm going to drop tons of names. It's my podcast. I can do whatever I want. So I brought Robin here today. She thought that she was coming on to be my guest, but little did she know I actually want her to be the host of the show.
Yeah, 5 minutes beforehand, she hands me a script telling me all the questions that she wants me to ask her. I thought that this is I get to be the guest and I get to talk about me, but no.
No.
Not so, but actually, Heather Brown, you are the best storyteller that there is. And everyone has been always saying your whole life that you got to tell your stories and you know how to hold a room. So I'm assuming there's something with you in these stories behind this podcast.
Yes, there's definitely something behind these stories in this podcast. You see, Robin, as you know, anytime I go somewhere with my friends, I have someone who says, tell them that story about this, tell them this story. And I do love to tell stories. I have loved to tell stories since I was a little girl, and I still love to tell stories. But I retired a couple years ago and I don't have anybody to tell my stories to anymore. So I thought, you know what better way to share my stories? And people love true crime stories, and I have a ton of true crime stories. I was a prosecutor here in Orange County for 24 years, and 2 years ago I retired. But in those 24 years, which were the best 24 years of my life in terms of my career, I truly had some crazy encounters with crime, criminals, the judges, jurors, some of the most amazing people that I've met in my life. I've met some of the greatest friends that I have, and I have a lot of stories to tell. So I thought, what better way to tell my stories than to have my own podcast and bring on all of my friends and all of my colleagues and people I've met along the way who have taught me some life lesson, who have really left a mark on my soul about maybe a tragedy that they've overcome. They've really shown me something in the midst of the darkest times of not only my life, but the victims' lives that I have worked tirelessly to try to protect. And it just felt like it was right. It felt like it was right. And I know that it's not just me that has stories to tell. I have so many friends, Robin, that are in the legal field, obviously, because we're lawyers, right? Big shocker there. But so many people that just do so many different, work in so many areas of the law, and everyone has a story to tell. And so I thought this would be great for people to hear the real, the down low, the nitty gritty about how it really is in the criminal realm.
Well, people connect to stories. I mean, in order to be a successful prosecutor or criminal defense attorney, or frankly, a contracts lawyer, you have to be able to explain the why. You have to be able to pull at people's hearts. You have to make it relatable, right? And so the things that we enjoy, I mean, if you've watched the Olympics, why do we like the Olympics this time? Because we're watching Snoop, who's giving us a story. Why do jurors connect with you? Is because you tell them why. And you tell them why, and not every lawyer, I know this is not necessarily a newsflash, not every lawyer is necessarily the best storyteller. But you do have a way that you can capture a room and tell a story. And I know that when you get rolling, it's just unwind the Heather and the stories kind of flow from there. But I think that the thing that people don't necessarily realize is how, these are stories that happen every single day to regular people, and not every single story is covered by Dateline or Today Show or ABC News. There are real stories that happen all over the place that you are covering. So I want to know which one of these stories, which ones are the ones are you on your docket first to tell? Because I know that I've got a few of my favorites.
All right. Well, that's one of the things I want to ask you is what favorites do you want me to tell? But we'll get to that in a minute. I don't just want to tell my stories. I want to bring in the detectives who worked on, murder cases that I was prosecuting. And sexual assault cases. I was a prosecutor in the sexual assault unit for 10 years, and I prosecuted some of the most horrific crimes ever imaginable, as you know, and I know you were a sex crimes prosecutor too. So I know this resonates with you, and we're definitely going to get to you and your career as well. But I plan to bring in SART nurses, which is, for those of you listening that don't know, that's a sexual assault response team, the nurses that deal with the rape victims that right after they have been horribly, brutally raped, the detectives who are on the hunt for the criminal who did this to them. I am going to bring on prosecutors, former judges, defense attorneys, and some convicted felons. I, along my journey as a lawyer and as just a friend, have met some really amazing people who have found the light in the darkness of their lives. One in particular who I have coming on the show, which you must tune in for this one, Robin. Well, you must tune in for all of them. But this one in particular, I'm going to have an inmate that I actually went to the prison in San Quentin to oppose his release. And obviously he's going to be on my podcast, so whether he's in or out of prison is a mystery, but he is going to come on my podcast and talk about his journey in prison at San Quentin and the light that he found while he was in there locked away for murder.
So interesting. So I guess I have to ask you, I mean, I know you're not a shrinking violet. You've been a woman on a mission. You have a point of view. Is this show going to be favoring a particular point of view? Or are you going to be able to look at both sides of an issue? Or is prosecutor downtown Heather Brown, which we'll talk about your name in a minute, is that what we're going to see come through the show?
I think in this show, what you're going to see is me come through the show. And I think one of the reasons I was very successful as a prosecutor was I really, truly did try to keep an open mind about things. And I understand, especially 24 years later, that there are good people who make very bad decisions. And then there's really, really bad people that need to be locked up and have the keys thrown away. And then there's good people that become bad people because of other people's poor decisions. And then they become good again. And
you forgot a group. What about the innocent people that get wrongfully?
Oh,
you forgot those people. I mean, I just have to say it because I think that and I get accused often of being, pro prosecution, because I do believe that, their crime does exist and sometimes punishment needs to happen. But I also recognize that there is a lot of mistakes and corruption and issues and mental health, and that we have to look at both sides of these things. And I'm going to challenge you to make sure you do that.
Well, challenge accepted, because I have, along my journey, I've actually dismissed a case against a woman who was charged with murder, because in the midst of my preparing for this particular case, I discovered that when I shifted my perspective on some of the evidence that I was reviewing, that she was innocent. And that she was, in fact, a victim of this particular, he was then the victim, but I believe he was, in fact, the perpetrator. And I dismissed that case immediately. And so there have been other cases as well.
Did you catch a hard time for that? Did your office back you up with that?
Yeah, they backed me up with it. I had to write a memo and explain all the reasons I was dismissing a murder charge. But once I explained why I believed that she was in fact innocent and not guilty of this crime, they supported me in dismissing those charges, thankfully. But I really was, there have been a lot of other things that have happened along my career where I realized, wow, like the police did get this wrong. And, listen, I'm pro law enforcement. I'm married to an FBI agent. You'll be hearing from him as well and his friends. That's the best part about, well, not the best part, sorry, husband, but Tom Brown. But there are many wonderful things about my husband, but one of the things that's great about doing a podcast is I have an endless supply of FBI agents that I can tap out and be like, hey, you have to come on my podcast.
Can they? Can people who are still working come on your podcast?
Depends on their boss. Well, my husband's an old guy, so all of his buddies are retired by now. So once you're retired, you can talk, which is why I'm doing this podcast. I wasn't allowed to talk. So now I am. And so I have things I want to say, and I have issues I want to explore. And I know a lot of people that feel the same way. And
what are you dying to say? What are you dying to tell everybody? What's been like, you have the mic. This is your chance. You get to say whatever you want. You've been holding it back. What is it that you want to tell the world?
It's not one particular story. What I want to tell the world is in the midst of the darkness, and I lived in the underbelly for so many years. And really to the point where, every day that I came home from work, there was just a piece of my soul that I felt had been stolen from me. But in the midst of that darkness, you can find the light. And if you can't find the light, you can be the light. And that's really what I want to tell people. I want this podcast to be a message of hope that, hey, in the midst of this horrible, dark, dark thing, there's at least someone who can bring a little levity to the situation. There is, I want to hear the stories about the people that in the midst of the darkest time for someone, they brought someone some hope and some light. And I know you do that in your career. I know you do that every day, Robin, which is why I'm so inspired by you and so impressed with you. You've been doing that since we graduated from law school.
Well, likewise, right back at you. It's a very dark world. You get very jaded. I know, right? We have to have a cocktail to even do the show, right? Because it's like, you get really dark. Your humor gets dark and you get really fun, but it does kind of wear on you. And I actually literally still to this day, when I was in the DA's office, I had this ritual, I'd literally have to come home and wash the day off before I could start. If I go to court, even now, I have to just wash the day off because there's just so much filth out there. And I'm not just talking filth in terms of bad guys. I'm talking filth in terms of bad colleagues and bad judges and mean clerks. We live in a really dark world right now. And, when you have one person who freaking answers the phone, I want to have a party, right? But those little things become the light. Or someone who actually says, you know what, you can appear virtually, or you know what, you can park there. Those are become really, really big deal things in the world of criminal justice. But to me also, and I'm sure like you, is that, largely these courtrooms are empty. You go, you do your case, and you handle your case. And I remember being in the DA's office, it would be courtroom after courtroom, and it'd be me, my victim, the defense attorney, the accused, the judge, the clerk, the bailiff. And that was it. There was no one there knowing what was going on. There was no family for the accused. There was no family there for the victim. And that really said a lot. And I always thought if you could make a difference in one person's life, that's an amazing thing. And I'm sure you get those calls. I'm sure you get the emails. How often do you hear from people who say you made a difference?
I do get those phone calls and those emails. Certainly not every day, but when I get them, I feel like my life has value, that I have some worth, and that I did something right with the tools and the skill set that God gave me. That's what it's all about, right?
People remember. I'm sure you think about, that school teacher that was really nice to you in third grade, right? Think about that one person that believed in you. That's what it's like to be you, except that you were that one person that gave them a reprieve from an abuser. You were the person that said, I believed you. You were the person that said, I'm going to protect you and I'm going to be there sitting next to you when you're in court. And you have so many of those stories, and some of them are funny, I gotta say. But some of them are really sad.
Really sad and dark. Just as you were saying that, I was reminded of this case I had. It was when I was in West Court in this woman's son had been killed in a speed contest. And it was horrible. And he was actually decapitated from the sunroof. It was tragic. Her son was like 17 years old. I mean, just, ugh. I'll never, I mean, I'm getting sick to my stomach just thinking about it right now. And the mom had gotten the call from, the police or whatever. And she obviously, was devastated to learn that her son was dead, but she was so in need of some type of closure because she wasn't there with her son when he died. And she begged me to look at the crime scene photos. And I told her, I don't want to do that. I can't do that. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So finally I thought, you know what, if I can bring her some type of piece, I didn't show her son's, the horrible gory photo, but I covered his head and saw her. I showed her the photo of her son laying on the ground with, tarp over his head. And it was heart-wrenching. But I can't tell you, this mom sent me this letter and just thanked me that she could finally sleep at night, having a little bit of closure, because it's hard to accept that your child is gone and dead. But when she was able to actually see the photo of his like lifeless body there, she felt something. So it was awful. That was an awful story, an awful bedtime story. I just told
you're
you.
just really cheering up the room today.
Strong,
Thanks.
right?
But I have to say that brings up a really important point, because not everyone mourns, grieves, processes the same, right? And so like what I may need to process my bad feelings in life or grief or losses or whatever traumas that I've experienced is not necessarily going to be the same as you or the same as anybody else. And being sensitive to like what people need for closure. And I do think that in our society right now, like our society tells people all the time, like, you need to do this, but here, and that's such a gift to recognize what this person needed and wanted and doing it in a graceful way. I think is really important. I also need to say that I don't know about you, but like, part of the reason why I went to law school was A, I couldn't do math and science, and B, I like fainted blood. So like during crime scenes, I'd like literally have to close one eye and like look back because it was so hard for me to look at those pictures. I mean, you've seen some pretty gruesome stuff, and I can think of a pretty gruesome story that you have in your repertoire.
What story
I just call
is
it
that?
the penis story. That's all I've got to say.
That story. I didn't even think that was where you're going with that.
It was I'm not even a guy, and I'm like closing my legs.
Yes.
So are you going to share the penis story with everybody?
I will. That will definitely be one of the episodes on the podcast.
Because, penis sells. So I'm telling you, if you can talk about a penis, actually they're kind of gross, but boobs would sell more. But
okay. So I didn't think that's the story you were talking about. I thought you were talking about the one where I got my nickname.
Well, your nickname. I was there when you got your nickname.
You were there. You're responsible. I blame you.
No, you. Well, first of all, what is your nickname?
So, I have a few of them. One, I got to just throw this one out, is the Brown Widow. And the reason they call me the Brown Widow is because I've had quite a few defendants who've killed themselves or tried to kill themselves after I prosecuted them for child molest and other crimes too. But yeah, I think I have more death penalty cases than the people who handle the death penalty cases. But
oh boy, making friends wherever she goes.
But my nickname from work is Downtown Heather Brown, hence the name of the podcast, right? Downtown. So
but you've always been Downtown Heather Brown. I mean, I didn't make that up, but it did get solidified and actually copyrighted, I shall say.
Yes.
In my presence.
Yes.
And blessed and publicized, and you became famous. Share that. What happened?
I wouldn't go so far as
there?
famous, but yeah. So you had me on the show. It was like my first big TV appearance. Do you remember this? Because we're going to get to, I promise, we're going to do a whole entire.
No, this was a whole farce. We already know that. This is me interviewing you.
Yes. It's actually Robin's podcast. No, we're going to definitely talk about your illustrious career, which is spectacular. But I got to get some words in first before I talk about how amazing you are. But no, Robin had me, she was a legal analyst on television and brought me on to her show because she heard about a case that I was handling involving this lady Gabriela Osorio was her name. And she had actually, she thought she was pregnant and was all excited and told everyone she was pregnant, and then learned she wasn't pregnant. And so she liked the attention she was getting. So she decided to fake her pregnancy for 9 months. And they even threw a baby shower for her. And then after the baby shower, and when it was time to eventually you got to actually have the baby when you're pretending you're pregnant for 9 months. So it's actually 10 months. Don't let them fool you. 40 weeks, right? We know that. So she, when 40 weeks was up, her husband was expecting her to have this baby. So she went to a pregnancy clinic in Santa Ana. And in the waiting room, she befriended this lady who looked very, very pregnant. And she told this woman, hey, how far along are you? When are you due? And the lady said, oh, I'm due any day now. And so they chatted, and she made friends with this lady. And at the end of the visit, when this woman was about to leave, she asked her if she could borrow her phone so she could call her husband to ask for a ride home. And what she did was she called her own phone. So now she had the lady's phone number, the victim's phone number. And then after a couple of days, she called the victim and said, hey, I met you at the clinic. Did you have the baby? And when she said yes, she said, I want to bring you some gifts and some diapers and help you out. So she went over to her house, and she proceeded to, when the lady was there with her little 3 and 4 year old or 4 and 5 year old children, and then the newborn. And when she went to change the baby's diaper, this lady asked her for a bag to put the diaper in, like a, Target bag or a trash bag. And Gabriela Soria grabbed the bag and she put it over this lady's head and tried to suffocate her. And the woman clawed her way out of this plastic bag while the kids were screaming, don't hurt my mom, don't hurt my mom. And then at that point, Gabriela grabbed a pillow and stuffed it over the lady's face, tried to suffocate her. And then while she was suffocating her, the victim, the mama bear, she bit Gabriela Osorio's finger off. That was probably the grossest photo I've ever seen, Robin. I don't know why. I've seen some horrible, horrible photos.
Some body part thing going on.
No, that one was too much. I don't know, just the little tip of the finger was so gross. But anyway, she bit this lady's finger off, and then she stabbed the lady 3 times. She stabbed the victim 3 times, but the victim was able to get away with her children. And then Gabriela was standing there with the baby, and she was screaming, get back here, I'll kill your whole family. And so at that point, the neighbors heard the commotion, and so they came running, and they convinced Gabriela. They said, the police are on the way. We've called them. Put the baby down, and we'll convince the police not to kill you. And at that point, she, gave up, and she turned over. I always thought on that trial, if we went to trial, she ended up pleading guilty. But if she went to trial, I would be like, show us your finger, bitch. Because I don't think they were able to reattach it. Anyway,
you're forgetting, you're burying the lead.
Point of my story. Well, it was still a good story, but the whole point of my story was, so I go on to Robin's show, to be interviewed about this crazy story. And the host of the show, and I'm assuming
because you had to put some context. You're missing some very important things.
Okay, go
Fox 11, Good Day LA.
Oh, Good Day LA.
This was Steve back in the day of Steve Edwards and Julian Barbieri and Dorothy Lucy. It was a big show, a big local show, and always great when you have a contact in the DA's office who's prosecuting the case. So I thought it was a I look good, you look good moment, right? And here I was able to be
they did hair and makeup. Not like today, right? You just get me.
And I have the prosecutor who's prosecuting this crazy woman come on, and then
so I've never been on television before at that point.
You hadn't?
Well, not at that point. And so I hadn't been on TV before. Maybe a little interview on the courthouse steps, but those are never flattering. Up to down, people, up to down. So anyway, I'm there, and you introduced me to Steve Edwards, and he says to me, something like, oh, you don't even look old enough to be out of law school. I'm just going to stare at your big brown eyes the whole time. And in that moment, it like really disarmed me. And I just thought, who is this guy, Robin? Like, oh my God. So it kind of just lightened the mood for me. I was no longer nervous. And then he turns to me and he says, so why'd she plead guilty, right? She pled to like 28 years, but he goes, why'd she plead guilty? And, I was just being playful at this point. And I was like, she was about to get her ass kicked by downtown Heather Brown. That's why she pled guilty. And so he laughed. And within seconds, we were on live TV. And he's like, we are on in 3, 2, 1. And all of a sudden, his opening line was, we're here with our, our very own, or downtown Heather Brown. And so across the screen on the TV, it says downtown Heather Brown. And from that moment on, it stuck. And now my friends all call me downtown Heather Brown. So I thought this podcast is really for my friends and family and the people that love to hear my stories. And anyone out there who hears about my podcast and wants a message of hope, or to know that there is light in the darkness and you can have moments of levity in the midst of some of the most horrible things. And I think that's really sometimes the only thing that can get us through. Would you agree with that, Robin?
I definitely would agree with that. I mean, I think that, first of all, when I think of downtown Heather Brown, I think of like, you're always down in the heart and soul of what's going on in whatever city. You've always, like, there's this, there's this kind of police downtown, true crime. I mean, this isn't just like, this isn't Law and Order SVU where like they solve a crime in, 48 minutes and you have a great happy ending. This is where like you pour your heart and soul into cases that they're real people that that has a lot of dark days, but you can have levity and you can have good moments, and you can, believe it or not, there is still every now and again still justice in the justice system.
Well, and Robin, that actually brings me to a great point, is that now that I'm retired, I've been retired for 2 years now. And so I do some civil work. I work as special counsel for a civil litigation firm, which is called Fight for Survivors, Greenberg Gross. And we civilly litigate cases against the churches and the schools and any of the organizations or sports clubs that cover up child sexual abuse. That is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. And yes, I am also a defense attorney, but I just, if it's a sex case, do not call me. I would be the worst attorney for you. But I can refer you to someone who does. But yeah, that is not an area that I could do defense work in. However,
what if you thought that the person was completely being wrongfully
I would
accused?
refer them to a really good attorney. And I do think that does happen. I know that happens. I know it happens. I'm not saying that every single person
and
who's
I can't
accused.
believe that I'm like saying all this, because I just have to throw out this other side.
No, I love the other side. And that's the whole point of this podcast, is there is another side. Maybe we should call it the other side.
There's a lot of sides.
There's a lot of sides. And there's a lot of perspectives on every single case. Has its own fact pattern. It has its own set of police officers, victims, witnesses, judges, agendas, and the I think the fun part about being in the criminal underbelly is having the smarts, the street smarts, not just the legal smarts, the street smarts, the knowledge of people and how people operate, and the communication skills and the ability to see through people, and a gift of discernment that allows you to actually find the truth in the midst of all of those dynamics.
So speaking of the truth, speaking of street smart, speaking of judges, you have a famous Orange County judge that's sitting, or not sitting, not in jail, out on bail, for being accused of killing his wife, former DA in your office, I believe.
Yep, I know him well. Not well, but I know him.
Is that fair game to dish on? I mean, these are like,
Yeah, fair game. No, it's fair game if you want to talk about it. I can obviously weigh in on what I think, but I don't really know the facts. So it would just be mere speculation on my part. I'm not trying to defend him at all. I'm not, because, you know, it don't look good. I'll just say that, right? Just from the bits and pieces. But honestly, that's kind of how I think everybody has these knee-jerk reactions where it don't look good and it, you know, this fact, oh, he's guilty or whatnot. And it's very easy to do that. I think on any case, not just him, you know, oh, it's a judge. There's a lot of people that kill their spouses. Okay. And so the fact that he's a judge doesn't make it any different, doesn't elevate him or lessen him in any way. He's still, you know, innocent until proven guilty. And you know what? I have to point that out to a lot of people who have this misnomer about, you know, you are innocent. You are presumed to be innocent until you're proven guilty. But just because a jury finds you not guilty, it doesn't necessarily mean you didn't do it. Okay. And the flip side of that. Okay. There's a flip side of that too. Just because a jury finds you guilty, and I'm not trying to undermine guilty verdicts, but there is always room for error in everything that we do. And I think people need to understand that, because, you know, in order to be found guilty in a crime of law, in order to be found guilty in a court of law, right, the DA has to be able to prove the case against you. And, it, you know, sometimes we don't have as much evidence as it takes to convince these 12 people of that person's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And does that mean that they didn't do it? I've seen people, you know, not on my cases, but I've seen people, you know, walk people out the door who I know were stone cold guilty. Stone cold guilty.
Oh, I totally can relate. I mean, I think that's happened to a lot of us.
Yeah.
If you've been
O.J. Simpson,
right?
Which happened when we were in law school,
right?
Yeah, I can weigh in on that one.
Yeah, let's
go back. As sin.
Let's go back to law school, because I don't know if you remember this story.
You mean when I kicked your ass in that Moo Court competition?
Win
a chicken dinner.
Shit.
I remember it. I won, didn't I?
No,
you don't need record. You're on a podcast. You can't lie.
Did not win.
There's truth serum in that cocktail.
But that was, I think that was an instrumental moment. We both won, or you could say you won, but we all know the truth around here. We don't have ties. Not everyone gets a trophy. Come on, cry baby.
So I won.
Fine, you won.
Okay.
But that was an instrumental moment, at least for me. I don't know about for you, but it was, you know, we sit here and a lot of kind of the work we do is about telling stories. And that's what you were talking about. And I don't know, do you remember what the topic was?
A homeless guy, and whether he had a constitutional right to like a paper in his for protection of privacy or something in his paper or his cardboard box.
That's pretty good. Huh? That's right.
I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but I remember 1994, the Moo Court competition against Robin Sachs.
It was whether or not a homeless person had a Fourth Amendment right to privacy, therefore cops needing a warrant to search his cardboard box. And you and I got assigned to the real courtroom. Like everybody else got assigned to classrooms. And
we had a real set.
We had a real set, and we had like real judges. And I will never forget when one of the Moo Court, the justices, because they ask questions. And I remember going, that's a really good question. And you know, because I didn't know the answer to it at the point. Of course, you did because you won, but I didn't. But what it also highlighted was just about being real. And I think that like what has been so successful for you is that you keep it real. Like you're a very real kind of person. Like I've run some cases by you, and I'm like, do you think this guy like has got, you know, do you think he did it? And she's like, well, let me give you 50 reasons why he did. Talking about 50 victims. And what have you. And so you are very opinionated, but have you found that you've ever been able to change your mind?
100%. No, absolutely. That's what I actually, I love it when someone's able to convince me otherwise, or I'm able to see a different perspective, because I am opinianated. Obviously.
Where's Tom Brown? I want to get the answer to this.
Yeah, he'll be like, hell no, she hasn't changed her mind once. I have changed my mind. I have.
So no, and are there like, so that's, I'm wondering if you're, you know, we're sitting here talking about stories.
I did
we're
about that murder case,
shows.
Right? I thought this girl was stone cold guilt. I mean, she was a stone cold killer, in my opinion, when I first read the case. And then there were things that I just were unexplainable to me other than guilty. Like everything led to guilty. And the 911 call was chilling to the point, and she made the 911 call. I was like, oh my God, this girl's guilty as sin. She's like, oh my God, I stabbed someone. And, it was ridiculous. I actually would love to have her on the podcast. If she's listening at any time, I'd love to have you on the podcast. I'm not going to say her name, but until she agrees, but I'd love to have her on because I know that somewhere she's, really happy that she's not charged with murder anymore.
You go find her.
I am. I'm
going
to
use your investigative skills and go find her.
No, I just don't know if she wants to relive that horrible time in her life when she was charged with murder and she was innocent. But yeah, and
so name drop for us. Who are you going to have on the show?
Oh,
give me some
juicy
name. Give me some
juice.
You can have some Kardashians on here for us.
I don't know about the Kardashians. I'm trying to get Mike Fell. I'm calling you out, Mike Fell. He's like a lawyer for the Real Housewives. I thought that'd be entertaining. Mm-hmm. He's always fun, good fun. And Matt Murphy, calling you out, Matt Murphy. I want you on my podcast, Matt Murphy. Murphy! He and I worked together in the homicide unit, but most importantly, before that, when I was in the sexual assault unit, he taught me a lot of things. And he's always, a crowd favorite. And I love the guy too. Let's see. I'm going to have some judges, some retired judges to tell stories. I'm really excited about, there's a man named James, a man named Joseph, and a man named Jesse.
Triple J.
The Triple J. These are 3 men who are convicted felons who were in prison for murder, 2 for murder and 1 for attempted murder, and they changed their lives around. And now they work tirelessly to try to bring light to the darkness for other inmates. All of them have really dedicated their lives now to doing good in the community and using their experience, having been in prison, to help, talk to kids and get them out of gangs, and to work for programs and in the prisons for women, and start newspapers, and they're just wonderful human beings. And they are open books. They'll tell you anything and everything you want to know about what it's like being locked down in prison for murder.
I think people are really fascinated about that. I mean, I think also if you can get someone who preps people for going to prison, because, there's a whole cottage industry for all kinds of resources that are available that are beyond just your defense lawyer and your prosecutor and judge that are in the courtroom. And you've got, prison prep people. You have people who write reports for mitigation packets. You have jury consultants who help you figure out how to pick a good jury. There's all kinds of, little cottage industries that have, and people who make really fancy trial exhibits now and all kinds of stuff, because we live in this generation where everybody's used to crime being solved, on television, and that you can binge watch it, right? And so there's a certain expectation of what's going to happen, and people are much more savvy.
Yeah, that's good to know. All the ins and outs. I love that. I forgot to mention too, I'm going to have some victims of crime on here. I'm hopeful. I have some, family members of a woman that was murdered on Christmas that I'm going to ask to come on the show. I have some victims of human trafficking that have agreed to come on the show and talk about that.
You actually do a lot of work with victims of human trafficking. That's a story that I would have you tell at a bar.
I'm actually going to have one of the gals that heads that human trafficking ministry on the show to talk about the work that she's doing to help victims of human trafficking. And there's so many good programs out there for people, victims of crime, and for, survivors of sexual abuse. I'm going to have Patricia Wenskunis on here. That is going to be amazing. She runs this organization called Crime Survivors. Mm-hmm. And she was a victim of a horrible violent crime, and she is willing to talk about it. And she is going to come in here and talk about how in the midst of that crime, when she was being beaten with a baseball bat, she prayed that if God saved her for the sake of her son, that she would dedicate her life to service to crime victims. And she started this organization called Crime Survivors. It's here in Orange County. And she has a whole resource center, and she works tirelessly for victims of crime. She's amazing.
She's amazing. I've done her run before.
Yes. Oh, the run. Did you run it or walk it?
No. Mama only walks
I'm
it.
like, I'll work the booth.
Yeah.
Pass out gummy bears. But
Exactly,
I'm not running for, sorry, I'll donate money. But yeah, no, she's amazing. I'm going to have her on too.
That's great.
So I have a great lineup, a great cast and crew of characters, from prosecutors, DNA experts, people who've worked on the Golden State Killer case coming on the show, defense attorneys, criminals, nurses, people just advocating and fighting to try to be a light in the lives of people who are going through their darkest time. And you're one of them. And we're going to talk about your career and how amazing you are and the light that you're bringing on our next podcast. So tune in next time so you can hear less from me and more from Robin Sachs about how freaking amazing she is and all the great work she's doing to shine a light in the darkness.